Jaime Osuna. In 2019, news broke out of a heinous crime at the Corcoran State Prison in California, where a prisoner, Jaime Osuna, had tortured and beheaded his fellow cellmate. But this was not the first time for Osuna to be in the news. In 2011, he was arrested for murdering a 37-year-old mother of 6, Yvette Pena. The case took more than 6 years before Osuna finally entered a guilty plea in 2017 to avoid the death penalty. He grew up with a stepfather who tortured him as a child. Police reports show that his stepfather tied him to a tree and whipped him when he was 5 years old. His uncle also threw a brick at him when he was young. After his conviction in 2017, he left the county jail and got transferred to Corcoran State Prison. 2 years after his transfer, the Corcoran State Prison received a new prisoner named Luis Romero. Romero got arrested when he was 17 years old and had spent 27 years in prison. On 7 March 2019, Romero arrived at the Corcoran State Prison. The guards put him in the same cell as Jaime, who had suffered borderline personality disorder as a child and never had a cellmate since he arrived. On 9 March 2019, about 24 hours after his arrival, the prison guards discovered Romero's dismembered body. Osuna showed no reaction to the judge's ruling. He appeared bored throughout the 90-minute proceedings, most of which he spent slouched in a chair with his eyes closed. Jaime Osuna, 34, has a Joker smile tattooed on his face and a pentagram on his forehead. There's hardly a spot on his face untouched by ink. In interviews with former reporter Olivia Lavois, Osuna described the thrill he got from killing Pena, whose torture slaying he admitted to and received a sentence of life without parole. For Osuna, murder is a rush, and it's alleged after Pena's death, he indulged in it again. Steven Sanderson. Some people think Stephen D. Sanderson is a hero for killing his child molester prison cellmate. Sanderson said, but he wants the world to know he isn't. Sanderson laid out his rationale for the killing before a Saginaw County judge. April 22nd, he returned to court to hear his sentence. People think I'm some kind of hero, when I'm actually not, said Sanderson moments before Saginaw County Chief Circuit Judge Fred L. Bouchard sentenced him for killing Theodore Dyer at the Saginaw Correctional Facility in Freeland. Sanderson, 51, pleaded guilty in February to second-degree murder for killing the 67-year-old Dyer, a Grand Haven native who was serving a 25-year minimum sentence for first-degree criminal sexual conduct against someone under the age of 13. Sanderson already is serving life without parole for murdering his girlfriend in 1991 in Wayne County. In a confession to the police the next day, Sanderson said he confronted Dyer about his conviction and that he began assaulting Dyer after Dyer would not stop trying to deny it or justify it. After knocking Dyer unconscious, Sanderson used Dyer's shoelaces to strangle him. Judge, without further comment, sentenced Sanderson to the maximum penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sanderson must serve his sentence for the Dyer murder consecutively to his current sentence of life without parole. After Dyer's death, Michigan Department of Corrections personnel transferred Sanderson to a higher custody setting. He is now lodged at the Iona Correctional Facility at the highest security level. Christopher Scarver. Christopher Scarver is an American convicted murderer. He is known for being the man who killed the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer in 1994 when they were both incarcerated in Columbia Correctional Institution. On 28 November 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer was assigned to work alongside Christopher Scarver and convicted killer Jesse Anderson. Working in the prison gymnasium toilet, when the trio were left unsupervised, Scarver beat both Dahmer and Anderson with a 20-inch iron bar from a piece of exercise equipment. After returning to his cell early, officers inspected the area and found Dahmer and Anderson. Both were taken to a nearby hospital, and Dahmer was declared dead an hour later, while Anderson died 2 days later from his injuries after being taken off of life support. Dahmer had sustained severe injuries to his head and face, and also had been repeatedly hit against a wall by Scarver. As he was attacked, Dahmer made no noise, according to Scarver. Scarver told a guard upon returning to his cell, "God made me do it. Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead." Despite there being no firm evidence that Scarver's crimes were racially motivated, it was speculated that this was the case. Scarver had reportedly previously claimed to be a victim of racism, allegedly saying after his first life sentencing, "Nothing white people do to blacks is just." Scarver was deemed competent enough to stand trial and was sentenced to 2 further life sentences for killing Dahmer and Anderson. He was deemed not eligible for parole. Christopher Scarver currently resides in the Centennial Correctional Facility in Colorado. James Elliott. Donald Angel of Death Harvey admitted to killing more than 80 hospital patients in his care whilst he worked as an orderly in Ohio and Kentucky. Official reports state the victim count is more likely 40 to 57 patients. The serial killer was active in the 1970s and 80s, targeting mostly cardiac patients, smothering them with pillows to ease the pain. Other victims he poisoned with arsenic and cyanide, and he also let the oxygen run out in their tanks. Harvey pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sent to Toledo Correctional Institution in Toledo, Ohio. On March 30th, 2017, Harvey was murdered by fellow inmate James Elliott. Months later, Elliott sent letters to the Blade newspaper in Toledo saying that he punched and stomped Harvey in his cell. He said he grew up in Kentucky near some relatives of Harvey's victims. The newspaper reported, Elliott was transferred from the Toledo prison not long after the 64-year-old Harvey died, but investigators said at the time they were in no hurry to file charges because the suspect was already in prison. Deshaun Madden. An Alger County inmate found guilty of murdering his cellmate has been sentenced to prison. 23-year-old Deshaun Madden has been sentenced to a minimum of 60 years and a maximum of 90 years Monday morning after he was found guilty of second-degree murder. That sentence is to be served consecutively, with his current term of a minimum of 16 years and a maximum of 30 years for assault with intent to commit murder, robbery, and carjacking. Madden was found guilty by a 12-person jury after a 5-day trial in April. The jurors deliberated for 2 hours before reaching their verdict. Officials found Madden's cellmate, Rodriguez Montes Burks, dead, wrapped in blankets in his cell at the Alger Correctional Facility last July. According to the autopsy reports, Burks died from a closed head injury. Inmate, 23-year-old Deshaun Madden, was transferred to a correctional facility in Munising Township and was placed in a cell with 23-year-old Rodriguez Montes Burks, who was gay. 2 days after the transfer, Burks was dead on July 20, approximately 2 hours before Burks' death. Manhood as person counselor, Karen Tunick, for a transfer to another cell. His requests were ignored. That was it for today's video. Before leaving, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.